Hi, everyone. It's the Catholic CEO, Henry Kutarna. Welcome to our Exemplary Catholic Leaders series. My special guest today, Andy McCon. Andy McCon is listen carefully, he's an investment professional who is seeking to sanctify the investment system. So, Andy, welcome to our podcast. How are you?
Be very glad to be here.
Glad that you're with us today. So, tell me about, in our audience, about sanctifying the investment segment, the investment world. What does that mean, and what are you trying to do?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it sounds maybe overly romantic and philosophical, but it's pretty simple, really. So my real kind of day job for most of my career has been a research analyst, really like equity research and the energy sector. And it's pretty straightforward. And I think you can sanctify your work in many ways and just working hard. It doesn't have to be as overtly and explicitly Catholic in any particular way. But the what I'm really talking about with sanctifying the investment industry is enabling conscientious investors to invest without violating their conscience effectively. And so I might just start with kind of the story of what I'm doing. In addition to that
Sure.
inner
Sure.
research role, um, and partnering with a group called Altum in Spain, and trying to do that. But really the origin of it was, a little over 5 years ago when, some might refer to it as like the peak woke moment, when many companies were participating in and promoting all sorts of pretty obvious evils, whether that's funding abortion, abortion travel, promoting transgender ideology, et cetera. The list goes on. And it becomes so overwhelming that I just felt compelled that I did not want to own these companies. I did not want to receive their dividends. I did not want to profit from them personally. And I know that that's a rich subject in terms of what's allowed or not allowed, or what's sinful or not sinful according to the church. But I didn't, I have since kind of done more research on it, but I didn't really need to do any research to listen to my conscience and follow that. So, long story short, um, I concluded that there weren't any simple investment products. So, think like ETFs or mutual funds for my personal investment portfolio that kind of did the basic screening that I had just described. There's a lot of funds out there that, um, do their best, and I don't want to disparage their work, but it wasn't what I was looking at, which I thought was pretty simple and straightforward. And I was quite surprised to find that really no one had filled that void in the market. And there's a lot of funds that have some sort of either explicitly Catholic or Christian or at least moral language, in their name or in their description of their fund. But what I just described of screening out companies promoting very obvious evils, um,
Yes. Yeah.
just that this. And so yeah, that really is the short version of when I recognized it didn't exist. There's two things. There was one, a business opportunity, a market need. I
Yeah.
felt pretty confident that I wasn't the only person who wanted a product like that. And so my business mind said, hey, there's an opportunity. But then of course there's the altruistic component of it. And I felt kind of called that, even I think God wants a product like that to exist. And I, pray that he can make me an instrument to help that come to fruition, and we'll see if we can do it. So yeah, that I would say that's the short version of the story and what I mean by sanctifying the investment industry.
Yeah, I love it. And I'll ask you a question about Andy. People come to us at the Catholic CEO and they say, you guys talk, and we speak like this too. And you and I, we've known each other for a year or two, and but we finally met in person a few weeks ago in Houston. And so I'm glad that we actually have met in person. It's a wonderful experience to hang out together and talk about business and things like this. But here's the question. A lot of people come to me and they say, you're expecting me to invest in a Catholic thing, which is obviously going to be less the ROI will be less. There's going to be less return on that investment. The people, they make that assumption, and I always counter them and I say, no, that's not true. What would you say about that?
Yeah. Well, it's a very common concern. One of the most common ones that are questions I get when I tell them about the idea. Without getting too technical, the short answer is you don't really have to do that. If you think about, you don't have to sacrifice returns in this manner. If you think about how many stocks there are in the stock market globally, or even just in the US, there are thousands. And
Mhm.
unless you're a highly sophisticated stock picker or you hire a highly sophisticated stock picker, which many people do, um, you'll realize that most people aren't looking for um, what's called alpha in the industry. They just want exposure to the market. And passive investments have been an extremely popular investment vehicle recently. And there's some studies that suggest that after you reduce fees for the more sophisticated stock pickers, that passive investments have outperformed active stock picking over the long term. And so that's a rich subject. But the point is, if you think about large indexes that just track the S&P or similar funds, they're really passive vehicles. And so whether you're tracking the actual S&P 500 or a different collection of 500 large companies that happen to be screened on moral principles, there's no reason to believe that you're sacrificing returns because it's such a broad and diverse index. And you really don't even, you need much less than 500 for it to be properly diversified in kind of a financial statistical sense. So that's one thing on, um, if you're screening kind of passive investments against each other, you really are sacrificing return. To the extent that you're using the screening research that I just mentioned to generate alpha to still, um,
Yeah.
you know, perform above a certain benchmark, it is true that if you reduce your universe of eligible investments, it will negatively affect your overall return potential. And so again, this is a very technical kind of investment um,
Yeah.
concept, but the gist of it is on my kind of basic estimates. Let's say you reduce the S&P 500 from 500 companies to 150 with
Sure.
moral
Yeah.
screening.
Mhm.
The financial literature would suggest that you might be giving out, call it between 30 and 50 basis points. So
Yeah. Mhm.
0.3 or 0.5% of
Yeah, percent.
annual
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
by restricting your universe. And so um, the quip that I often use for that is that sounds like a pretty cheap price for me to sell yourself for. And
I love it.
if you
This,
think
this,
that,
yeah,
yeah, if
yeah,
it's important to if it's important to not invest in companies promoting evil, and you say why, you say, well, I didn't want to give up return, and you think you could really look St. Peter in the eye at the gates and say, well, I really needed that extra 30 basis points. I don't know, it's not a
exactly.
lot.
That's right. Well, Andy, you and I both know that people have developed now impact investing, impact funds, social impact funds. So the secular world itself already expects us to buy into a certain kind of, I'll call it a religion of investing in impacts rather than ROI. So the Catholics come along and say you can do the same thing, and you're only going to give up, a third or a half a percent. Come on. So I know I'm oversimplifying it as well, but the idea of having some sort of a Catholic basis for investing, and who says that ROI is the only number? You could also be helping a Catholic business. You could be helping to spread good in the world, and I know I'm selling your story here a little bit, but that's the point, isn't it? That the return on investment isn't the only criteria on which we choose to make an investment.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And, economic theory and financial theory, we have to make simplified models and identify kind of the highest good, you might say, in that particular industry. And so identifying returns and adjusting it for risk is kind of really the essence of what the investment practice is. And that's all well and good as long as you are still placing that in the context of what it means to be a human person. And of course, the highest good, as we all know, is God, and everything subordinated to that. So you can overdo the isolation of risk and return measurement,
Right.
kind of lose the big picture, which, yeah, you could say that about a lot of aspects of life. So, and yeah, I think what you mentioned, like the ESG investment movement, a lot of people would point to that and say, I'm just an investor who only cares about risk and return. I don't care about ESG. That was one perspective. But the ESG movement got billions and billions, massive flows of capital, similar to what you're talking about with impact investing. And, a lot of people take a cynical view of that, and there's plenty to be disappointed in that particular movement. But at least it proved the concept that there's an appetite in the culture for broadening our horizon from a strict risk return perspective to be more um, thoughtful about what we're actually doing when we invest, which, if you think about the investment business since the beginning of time, investments have been around forever and there are parables in scripture about it. You know, Usually it was a personal exercise. It involved trust. You know, it involved your neighbors and your community, and you wouldn't want to invest in something that promoted evil. And that would harm your reputation. And it was normal to think about the moral implications of your investment and how it would impact your community and the people you knew. And as we have globalized everything, including the investment sector, and it's all gone electric, and we've invented things like 401ks and ETFs and these things, we've lost the personal touch, and we've lost that moral component that was fundamental for thousands of years.
Yeah. Understood. This is a fascinating topic. Let's turn, Andy, to, you're a Catholic. You are a man who espouses Catholic principles. I know that. I've met you, and I know you have a young family. Tell me about your Catholic story. Have you always been Catholic?
I have, yep, a cradle Catholic, which is indeed a blessing. Sometimes I look with jealousy on my convert friends and all the zeal that they have. That I'm not being
Yes,
hard,
the
but no,
zeal.
it's a
Yes.
blessing.
Yeah.
It's a blessing to have a cradle Catholic background. I was one of 7 children, and devout parents, but um, not the Bible thumping variety. And my parents really emphasized freedom, um, which I think is important. And I certainly use that freedom to get in a bit of trouble myself. But, I never really lost the faith. But
Mhm.
actually, one way to put it is, you know, as a youngster who, gotten, had his own journey and got in trouble, I never lost the faith. And I was always hyper aware of the tension between, the natural inclination to compartmentalize your faith and say, well, I'm going to listen to my conscience and my faith on Sundays or when I'm around my family, my home. But when I go out, well, I'm just going to compartmentalize it, and it doesn't belong there. And, you know, if you pray long enough or the sake of, and listen to your conscience enough, that will eventually give, and you'll have to realize that that's unsustainable. And thanks God that I did eventually come to that conclusion.
Mm.
But I think it does apply here. What I mentioned earlier is that I think
Yes.
even some excellent, faithful, devout Christians, they might be compartmentalizing their faith as it relates to economic activity, not really even be realizing it because it's just so common. So yeah, I think that kind of lesson from my youth is probably coloring what I'm trying to do today with, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. In the work that you do and in the work that we do at the Catholic CEO, you're going to see people out there, business people who want to be Catholic in their business principles of how they operate their business and so on. What do you see out there affecting the Catholic business owner, let's say, who wants to do that, or a young person who wants to start a business? They're a Catholic and they want to make sure that they follow certain Catholic principles. What are the pressures? What are the barriers out there? Can this be done? Can you actually form a business that follows Catholic principles? I know you've said you can, but let's apply it to some others who might want to start a business or are
Yeah.
currently running one and running into those pressures that we know about.
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, there, there are many ways to live out one's faith in their vocation of work. And a lot of what I've been talking about today is just on avoiding evil.
Mhm.
And it's not really that difficult, actually, I don't think. It requires some fortitude and being countercultural in some instances, but most businesses, they're pretty straightforward. They provide some service of value or some good of value. And if you stick to that, the vast majority of businesses that we give money to, what we're really paying for is morally neutral or morally good in some way. And the evil components of it, they're not as difficult to avoid, I think, as some might seem. So just takes fortitude or to be a little countercultural in some instances. And so, and not to say that it's easy to live the faith in the everyday life, but in terms of what I was talking about of avoiding some of the obvious evils of kowtowing to cultural trends that go against the faith, I think that's just a little bit of courage can go a long way on that in that regard. Otherwise, for any entrepreneur generally running a business, yeah, I think that the hard part is the normal stuff. It's um being joyful and patient, acquiring virtue through habit. It's everything else that applies to all the other areas of life that also applies to your job. That's what's difficult. So I've cut the ETF idea I'm pursuing is more, it's almost low hanging fruit. I don't think I'm hoping that there can be other companies that can at least do the easy part of avoiding evil, but the virtue and being joyful at all times and living gospel, that stuff's hard. And yeah, it's hard for all of us.
It's very interesting you say that. Some people have said to me that it's harder to be a smart business person with, good pricing, good quality product, good customer service, good financial spreadsheet analysis so you can do scenarios and kind of track everything that's going on and have a dashboard every week of performance. That's tougher in many people's minds than this simple discipline of avoiding evil, how you do your marketing, how you treat your customer, all these things, how you treat your employees better than the minimum that the law requires, for example, things like that. So I've heard this from others, and I think you're suggesting that maybe the same thing, that it's difficult to do the basics too. And the Catholic principles on top of that all may not be such a stretch that people think it is. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what do you think? Is that possible?
I, yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we're in a hyper competitive business environment, and finding the right idea and then executing on it. I mean, Henry, you write about that in your daily emails. You dedicate your life. You've seen lots of examples of, yeah, being successful at business, generating enough profit to support a family. Um, that has plenty of challenges. Yeah, I don't want to oversimplify, but just avoiding the evil component. Gosh, that hopefully that comes naturally into some of us, at least in our business lives. And then, yeah, going the extra mile and showing virtue and, maybe even using your business as an apostolate of sorts in its own kind of humble way. That can be difficult. But yeah, I'm just saying the avoiding evil part, you got bigger fish to fry. Hopefully it's other stuff that,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, Andy, the time has gone by so quickly already. We could talk a lot longer, but we're going to come to a natural close of our discussion here today. So, where can we find you? We're going to put into the show notes, by the way, your website and your email address. But what can we do to support your business and your efforts in this area?
yeah, thanks for asking. The group I'm partnering with is called Altum Faithful Investing. Their website's altumfi.com. Great group based in Spain. Their core business today is the screening research I had mentioned. There are lots of investment advisors already using that, and that's going to form the basis of an ETF. There's an index already out. I'll put that in the show notes as well that shows you which stocks have passed the screening exercise. We're also considering the launch of a consumer guide. It's a similar framework, but it informs consumers about what products to buy. Um, on a state basis to help, avoid evil by contributing to companies that promote it. Um, and so, yeah, we'll put all of those in the show notes, including my email. And to the extent that people are interested in supporting it in any way, we'd love to hear from you because we're in the very early stages of it. And yeah, what really we're trying to pursue is making this as democratic as possible, meaning available to everyone from tiny retail investors to large institutional investors, and with the consumer got, income, price, of all stripes. Everyone's conscience is equally valuable. And so we want to enable everybody to align their economic activity with their faith. And so, yeah, any and all support and interest, we would love to hear from you.
That's great. Thanks, Andy. Well, I can see that, you've taken this concept of sanctifying the investment area, the investment sector in a specific way. And I love to hear that. So thanks again, Andy, for being with us. It's the Catholic CEO, Henry Kutarna. God bless you, Andy, and thanks for being with us today.
God bless you, Henry. Thank you.